This is In Between Them, a podcast where we uncover what it really felt like to be a child of divorce. I am Shannon Darrow, and each episode brings honest stories from brave adults who lived through this as children. This is In Between Them. Let's get going. Hi, Dustina. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
I just want to start by kind of just giving the audience a brief snapshot of who you are so they can connect to you. So maybe just give me a high level minute or two on how you got to this point and what makes your life so exciting and so interesting at the present time.
All right. I am 55 now. I just turned 55. So my life feels very boring and exciting all at the same time. I am a wife. I'm a blended family. So I have a daughter who's 32 and then three stepsons. They're 18, 20, 22. And I've been married for like 3.5 years. So we've been together for almost 9. And then I am a senior living advisor, which means I help seniors find independent living, assisted living, memory care, adult care, in-home care, anything that they need for that transition. I am like the connector for that.
I
Yeah.
didn't even know that was a job, but it makes so much sense. Well, I can imagine that that's such a scary time for either kids trying to find places for their parents or for older people on their own, and having someone to help place them in the
Yeah.
right place. I mean, that uh, I mean that just seems wonderful.
It's super, super rewarding. I mean, it's more fulfilling and rewarding than I even thought it would be as I go on and have the relationships with the people. But the best part is my services are free to the families. And so it's kind of like ministry work at the same time. It feels like, I get to advocate for them, and yet I still get to make a living and get paid from the place they end up.
So that's okay. I was wondering if it was like a Medicaid, Medicare payment, or if it was through the place. So you're like a recruiter in a way,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, exactly. I get a finder's fee or something, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. Wow. That is, I mean, well, there'll be no shortage for you, as into all the future. So that's really fantastic. Um, excuse me one second. I have to let this, I'll just edit that out. Sorry.
Perfect. My phone rang anyways.
Oh, good
I was
timing.
like,
Yeah. Or here, hold on. Gosh, go. All right. We'll edit that all out. That's the beauty of interruptions. Okay, so we'll pick up right here.
nice.
Well, thank you for that. I think that that's just a fascinating career, and quite frankly, anyone who's listening to this who had no idea that existed. I mean, I hope that somebody picks up on that and just finds that as a resource, because that is such a critical piece, I would imagine. So glad you shared that. Um,
Thanks.
so what I would love to get into is, really why we're talking today in sharing stories of a divorced childhood. And I would love if you could begin by just taking me back to how old you were when your parents got divorced, and what, if anything, do you remember just from that kind of time frame initially, and then we'll kind of dig into the transition and adjustment after that.
Yeah. So I was 5. I was pretty young. And I have a brother who's 4.5 years younger. So he was like 6 months. To be honest, I don't have a lot of memories. Um, but I have a few like very vivid, specific memories. One is moving into our home, the home my mom bought. It was like it was brand new, which was amazing that my mom could do that. But it had like avocado lime green everything. And I remember like that so vividly. It was like the 70s. So it was just,
Yeah.
um, at that time, very trendy. And I remember being like, ooh, this is a lot. And then I remember they tried to get back together a few times, and I think that I was kind of put in a weird situation. Probably they, I mean, I have like a crazy memory. My dad asked me, and I was probably 6. He asked me to go ask my mom if she'd take me back or take him back.
Wow.
And I remember like, okay, I have to ask. My dad needs me to do this, right? So I remember walking in and sitting at the counter with my mom and asking her, and she said no, and I was like, oh no, like I failed.
Oh my
But you know
God.
what I mean? Like I've never talked to my dad about that or my mom. I'm sure that they were running on fumes and would do things different, but I just remember that was like a huge core memory of being like, this is on me. Like I'm responsible to figure out how to like get them to fix this stuff.
That is absolutely incredible. And yes, to your point, I'm sure they would go back and like to do things differently. Everybody, in retrospect, sees the maybe not the best decisions that they made, but I think that that also it's a very profound example of being put in the middle because kids
Yeah.
are constantly put in the middle. I mean, I'm sure there's even greater significant being put in the middle, but that to me at that age is so pivotal for you literally thinking, okay, this is on me to get my dad back in this house basically, my family back together. And wow, that's really amazing. So, did they continue to try and get back together after that or was that kind of your last memory of that?
Well, for more transparency, my mom, I mean, I literally am like, I hope my parents never see this podcast. But my mom goes, no, he cheated on me X amount of times. I'm done. And that also was like, ooh, that's my dad. You know what I mean? Like finding out these things like as a very young child. So no, not after that. I think they just went their way. Um, and that was
Okay.
that. But they worked well they co-parented well. My dad and my mom were always in my life. I went to my dad's like Thursday every Thursday, and then every other weekend I was with my dad, and then the other times I was with my mom. And
Okay.
they lived 15 minutes from each other for the
Okay.
most part. Worked in the
So,
same town.
so when you so divorced at 5, you have that kind of at 6. What does it is it a smooth transition and like into high school and do you keep that schedule or at what point do you feel that you hit a hiccup? And I just thought of another question that may coincide. At 5, you obviously realize that your parents don't live together, especially with that kind of dialogue that went through. But um, at what point do you realize that that's not the norm? Because, we're talking many years ago when it wasn't as normal, when people weren't as um, getting divorced, but even open about it. So, what was kind of that realization as well? Like, when did you realize that about the difference about your family?
I don't think I ever felt different.
Wow, that's so great.
Yeah, I think I was so young, and I honestly might have been 5, and when he had me ask that question, I just like maybe barely 5 when they got divorced, and 5, a few months later. But um, that was my norm. So it wasn't like other people had their family intact and I felt strange. It's just that this was my norm. Um, Now, my norm was very dysfunctional. Like both households were very dysfunctional. And I learned to live in that. And that has got that. I got a lot of therapy for that.
Well, so what can you elaborate on the dysfunction?
Yeah.
Because so what interests me is how you said they co-parented well, but now they're kind of equally dysfunctional, which usually doesn't make for a good co-parenting situation. So I'm interested into, how did that actually result with kind of some dysfunction individually?
Yeah. So when I say they like co-parented well, um they didn't fight. They didn't do a long drawn out divorce. In fact, my dad he's retired now, but he's a divorce attorney. He was a family law practice, and him and my mom were high school sweethearts, and they lived in a in sweet home in a small town, and they both had the passion and drive to like get out of there and do better for their lives. And I think they bonded on that. Went to beauty school, and my dad went to law school. My mom started doing hair, and she put my dad through law school. They had they were very driven and very successful. They had a couple of homes, built homes, both owned their own businesses. And so there was a lot that they were like agreed on, but they just kind of went very separate ways, I think, when the push come to shove of like um meant for each other. And so then when they got divorced, my mom, and this was back in a time which was weird. It's super weird because I don't feel like we're that far removed, but like women couldn't even have checking accounts. But my mom had a home and a mortgage and, all this stuff. She owned a business. And I think my dad had a lot, to do with that. Like he empowered her in that way. Um, Obviously not in other ways. And then my dad just wanted something different for his life. And so he threw himself into becoming very successful and working hard. And then he would just have a lot of relationships. So on the dysfunction side of my dad, he was, I mean, I've lost count of how many like women moved in and moved out and their families and uh, relationships that he's had. He's now since been married for over 25 years. This is his third marriage. It's also my mom's third marriage. So, but with that, that brought, you're bringing in somebody else's life.
Yeah.
And there developed in me a lot of insecurity of like waiting for the shoe to drop,
Hmm.
like holding my breath because like I might have really liked this person, but I couldn't get attached. And I didn't like this person, but I had to put up with them. You know what I mean? Different, like so many different things with that. Even like I was a daddy's girl when I was young, like little. Like my dad was everything, like two, three, four. And so I remember another vivid memory is one of the girlfriend's daughters was sitting on my dad's lap, and my dad was just holding her like he would me. And I was so angry inside. And like, you're taking my attention. Like, I didn't want to share that, but now she was there. And of course, consciously or subconsciously, he's trying to impress and like, you know,
Yeah.
impress the girl that he's interested in. And I just remember being like, angry inside, and I didn't have a way to show it. I couldn't show it. And then also feeling slighted because there was less affection and attention for me and I needed it, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that's that. And then on my mom's, she had bipolar. She's bipolar, and so I think that contributed to the relationship dynamics with them. So that was like another very insecure place to like find traction and security as a kid. And so she wasn't a revolving door for relationships like my dad was, but she she had her own issues. And then um, her and I seemed we seemed to not get along for whatever reason. And I think it's because personality wise, I was always like, no, this isn't okay. Like, whatever it was, I just was like, I remember being a little kid going, does anyone else think this is messed up? Like, and thinking, probably not, because they're all just acting like it's normal.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Wow. That's pretty amazing. I mean, one of the things I think that's pretty well known is when parents get divorced, and lawyers and therapists and people will tell everyone that kids need stability, predictability, and consistency, among many other things. But those are things that are pretty kind of, I think, built in to that first transition, is trying to establish those things. I think they quickly kind of fall to the side, but that is everybody's kind of intent, first and foremost, and what is repeated over and over. And I'm listening to both of these and I'm like, you're very young, at this point, and really don't have any of that in a consistent way. Like, you might have had some of it throughout at different times, but I mean, with people like multiple women and different families, you know, at how long? I mean, I'm guessing you said he got married 25 years ago, so your entire childhood, I'm assuming, was different women and potentially different siblings in the house with you. And that kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, that doesn't go away. I think you go into adulthood with that, and it can be very hard in so many different facets of your life, never feeling sure. And then with your mom on that same front, without getting into examples, but just knowing any type of mental disorder is going to cut into that stability, that security, that kind of predictable nature of, what your home life is like. And so, I mean, that's tough to have that in both places, you
Yeah.
know. Did
Yeah.
you, because I think about it too, like if your dad had someone move in that had kids and you really liked them, then like the loss of any of that is it's very major, and my guess is that that wasn't being dealt with along the way, is the feelings that you had when something would end, and speak to that a little bit, because I think that people don't understand why, when people get divorced, usually it's not both. Usually one person wants to say, you can't introduce a new significant other to our children for 6 months or 12 months, or until you're serious, or whatever. They try to build parameters around it. And that's a really hard thing for even the court to enforce. But I would love for you to speak a little bit on that, because I think that's a perspective that, if people could understand, it's very important. And like you said, she's sitting on his lap. All of the emotions you had at that moment, all of the things that was telling you, and, right or wrong, I mean, maybe in certain circumstances, your dad's trying to make her feel comfortable too. So it's like a nice thing. You can look at it from a million different angles. But ultimately, someone needed to be looking at you and how it was impacting you, and or at least communicating with you after the fact about it or something. So, can you talk a little bit more to that process throughout the different years that you kind of witnessed all of that?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, my dad was also married for 11 years, so 25, 11, and then I was 5 when I got divorced. So what is that?
36.
Like 40 years of my 55 years that he was married. But in the 15 that he wasn't, there was 10, at least 10 moved in relationships, much less talked about, known about, like maybe met, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, and I think the hardest part is actually, I don't even know. I don't remember any, like, being really attached to any of the kids. Um, which is funny because I've never thought about that until you said, like, oh, what was that like? And I was like, oh, I didn't. Like, I can't tell you one kid's name. Um,
I wonder why. Like, I wonder if that's almost because you knew they might leave. So why get attached? I mean, they couldn't have all been terrible kids. You know what
no,
I mean?
no,
So,
that's not the
yeah.
thing. I don't think that they were at all had anything to do with the kid. I think that one, I think they were in and out pretty quick, you know, like that's not a significant time. Um, and they may have only been there for short periods of time because if they're not there when I'm there based off of their parenting schedule, we weren't a family that went or on my dad's side, we weren't a family that did like vacations and stuff. Um, but I remember I got some of the women were really lovely and I wanted them that stability, right? Like they were really like, oh, they make me feel good. Like I felt good around them. I felt safe. They included. And um, my dad's way of dealing with a breakup was just in the like overnight. There was no talking about it. There was no prepping. So I don't remember like at what point, like at how many I understood that this could be a thing. But I remember that when my dad would pick me and my brother up for his time, I would always kind of hold my breath, like, okay, all right, and like walk into the house. Is everything still the same? And as an adult, as a grown up, I am very hyper folk like my husband's like, oh my god, you could be a private detective. I'm like, the rug looks different. You know, I'm
Yeah.
like something's
Yeah.
fishy. And it's not intentional. I think it was just like a coping mechanism to like size things up very quickly. But we would walk in the front door of my dad's home, and that would be how we learned Teresa isn't around anymore. And then we would walk in to my dad's home and we would learn Linda is now around. And you're just like, okay, I can do this, you know? Um, so that was a lot of, I didn't realize how much I held my breath or how shallow I breathed. I had to do a lot of EMDR and therapy for that to like actually feel like, oh, it's okay. I assumed, because it's all I ever knew, that everyone had a little buzzing in their body all the time. Because I never didn't. Um, and it's wonderful that you don't have to actually. A buzzing isn't for not everybody has it, and you don't have to.
Yeah.
But one crazy thing is, my dad was very generous and he was well off and he was generous. And so anytime he would bring someone in, oftentimes, you know, houses are getting split and they're moving in their stuff. And who knows if I don't know if they put it in store, like other stuff in storage. I don't know because I wasn't I was a kid. But when they're moving out, they would need furniture. And so one time he gave my furniture away, and I had no furniture in my room, like no bed. Like, and I just remember being like, nothing's safe.
How old were you at that point? Do you remember?
Oh, like 8 or 9.
Like these
Yeah.
are things that leave such an impact. And what I would say as you were saying that, like these are all like I don't know on the big T, little t trauma scale where they fall, but they're all traumas. And we don't think of all of these types of things as trauma when you think of like, okay, your parents got divorced. We all know like a divorce is a trauma, and other very significant things that can happen to kids. But all these little things are compounding on you. And I think it's really important to demonstrate that, like, taking all your stuff out of your room is again just like the other daughter on his lap is it's telling you so much, and to your point, nothing is safe. Like, that's a huge thing to be learning at 8 or 9 years old, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, okay, keep going. But that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I remember the first time I told my husband that, he was like, he just didn't even know what to say. He was like, "What?" Um, and part of that like is because we're just so committed to like making our kids feel safe, even with our bad choices.
Yeah.
And so I did not have a safe childhood. That's just something I learned, and quickly adapted to try to be the safest me I could be. But I was also a super happy kid, and my because my parents were 15 minutes apart, and there was always consistency. My dad always showed up. My mom went to all my sporting events and stuff. I don't know. It was my life,
Yeah.
and I didn't think much about it until much, much older. When I was 11, they both met their second
Spouse.
spouse. And so when I was 11, within 6 months, they both got married. And um, the person that my dad married, I loved. And I was like super excited. She was amazing. And then the person that my mom married was awful. And he was a horrible human. Um, and so I remember again just being like, life just changed. And um, like my mom would, it was back in the day when you could like let your kids go just do whatever, but she'd be like, I could ride my bike, and I had all the, and like I remember being like riding my bike and loving the wind in my hair and feeling free. You know what I mean? Just, it was probably a safe place for me, as like the freedom of like,
Yeah.
I'm just out exploring the world, going to my, bebopping around to my friends' houses. And the little first thing was, he's like, you can't do that. And like, he came in hot, like he's going to lay the hammer down with these kids. He had 2 kids of his own. And then he was very abusive to my mom. And um, I would say he was abusive to me, but I was much more vocal about like, I'm not okay with that. So he took the worst out on my brother and my mom. And then I was just trying to protect everybody. Um,
Mm.
it sucked.
Yeah. And you're 11, I mean, you carried some really big things. from really young. And I think that if anyone heard like one of these things on their own, they would be like, well, that sucks. That's not right. But when you kind of put them all together, it's a lot. Um, how long, how long well, so you're 11 and both of them get married. So did they both stay married to those people through till you were 18?
Yeah, they were. My mom was married for 25 years, and my dad was married for like 11. And then they had a baby. So I have a half brother who's just my brother. I just call him my brother. He's awesome.
Okay.
Um, but
Did
yes,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
You said your stepdad had kids. Did they also live in the house or were they older?
They lived in the house, and one was my age, and one was 3 or I think 4 years older. Um, yeah.
Okay. And when you say he was abusive, was he also to them or was it just your brother and your mom?
No, he was abusive to everybody. Um, and the hardest part, like one of the significant differences between my mom and my dad is atheist and my mom is a Christian. And um, as to date, that's still the case. But my mom, my mom's husband really played that card. Um, and so he was like involved in, and I love the Lord, like I love Jesus, he saved my life, but like he presented one way at church, and he was very involved in everything. And like we would have youth groups at my house. I remember like, and all the middle school youth group stuff was at my house, and all of that was fun. I mean, I had tons of friends, and I was functioning on the outside just fine, but I was dysfunctioning like my whole insides, and just um disassociating a lot. I don't have very many, like if people are like, "Oh, Dustina, remember when we did this?" I'm just like, I don't. I don't, I was there, I was participating, I was having fun, but I was like not um that wasn't where I was storing memories. I was like protecting, probably, just like always be alert. And so I think that that took up a lot of energy. Um, how deep do you want to go?
However much you want to share. I mean, I don't want to push you, but
Yeah.
I,
So just divorce sucks, and you don't know what you're getting. And the older son sexually abused me, and I didn't really even understand that that was happening. I didn't understand that that's what it was. I just was like excited that somebody was paying attention.
yeah, yeah.
And so that part, like, is like, man, it was all messed up. Every part it was messed up. Um, and then I remember telling my dad things that were going on in the home, and then nothing was being done. Um, and since then, my dad and I have had some really good conversations. He had cancer a couple years ago, and we had a lot of time in the hospital. And right or wrong, his decisions were. Uh, so when they got divorced originally, my mom had a mental breakdown and ended up in the hospital for like a long period of time. And the doctors said she would probably never be back to like functioning, which she did. And so it's a blessing. But my dad was like, I can't take the kids. Like in his mind, he's like, if I take the kids, then she'll die. She'll that would be the end of her. So that's kind of like his reconciliation is like, it's probably bad, but not too bad. So I don't want to like disrupt things, but also he didn't want to disrupt his life. And so it was pretty crazy. And I also, when I was 11, I developed an eating disorder. And uh, that was like 27 years of my life. And very, very, very free from it now. So I'm grateful. Um, but when I was 14, I had enough, and I moved out because I could. It's like it's the age you can,
Mhm.
or at least back then I could choose. So I went to live with my dad because of all the things that my dad's was safest.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
um, and then my mom, that didn't go over well. She was really hurt. But it was a good move for me. And then my brother did the same thing. And
Yeah. So then did you live at your dad's until you were 18?
kinda,
You graduated high school?
yeah, I did. I did, but then my mom finally like got over some stuff and would let me like go back and forth. So I really lived, I would say the majority, I lived dual households because it was split time half and half from my until I graduated high school.
Okay. Um, I had a question and give me one second. We were talking about, oh, with all of the difficulties that were going on at your mom's, and you kind of went into how you talked to your dad and his rationalization of it, more or less. What was going on at your mom's in terms of any acknowledgement of any of it? Was anything being talked about? Nothing.
No, it was there was a lot of like, don't be rebellious. Um Quit causing problems. Just do what he says.
Yeah.
But and again, like those are the behind the closed doors memories, but the all the other things is like I'm excelling in school, I'm playing sports, I have like an amazing group of friends. I had friends with good families, which I also think, by the grace of God, that was something, a gift. And so as dysfunctional as it was, I didn't totally know it at the time.
Right. Um, that's you touched on something there that I was going to ask you earlier, and you said you had like a lot of friends, families that were around that were good. What about any extended family? What like trying to understand a little bit of the support network around you and family, friends, families can be as critical as any family member. I think having that outlet, having those safe places, having those kind of healthier environments, all of that is wonderful. But that extended family is so critical because it's like people who know the players, in a little bit more of an intimate way. So what did you have for family involvement?
My mom, like one of her brothers, she was really close with, and then so my uncle, and then he married my mom's best friend.
Wow.
And because that was my mom's best friend, the daughter, I'd known since I was little, like 3. She was 3 and I was 6. And we're best friends today, like the best of friends. But yeah, so we had that. We did a lot of both my families come from big families. Holidays was a lot because I would go to like like at Christmas, it would be like 4 Christmases, Christmas Eve here and then race to the next. And I don't know that I had a support. I don't definitely didn't have a support network from family, but we had a lot of family always around, so it just felt like fun and normal.
Yeah. How was that to have so many holidays? Do you wish
Um,
was there a different way you could have envisioned it working?
I remember, I don't know how old I was, but I had a diary and I would like write in my little diary, and I logged every single little, like down to the littlest thing that I got for Christmas. Cause I remember I got a haul, like, because I had
So many
grandparents
places.
and step grandparents and uncles and this and that, right? And like I remember it just this huge pile and thinking, like this is pretty cool. Like this is a good thing. This is a benefit. So there was like chaos totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like a lot. Like you didn't get to really just enjoy the holidays because you just had to show up and get on to the next
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And to be honest, like half the people I didn't even know. Because like if it's my dad's girlfriend's parents, we're going over there for to people, strangers. So as an adult, I really value not having an open door for holidays. Like, some people are like, you should be generous and invite everybody in. And I'm like, no, thank you.
yeah.
Now, if it's one of our kids' friends that needs a place, I'm like, we are open door, come in. We'll bless you, like do
Yeah.
whatever. But I'm like, I don't want strays.
Yeah. Wow. That's so with, let's say your mom's family and your dad's family, take the step families out unless it applies in any way. Was anyone in those families aware of some of the difficulties that were going on? And did any of those people show any concern for you or your brother, or was it all surface all the time with everyone?
Um, on my dad's side, he was doing a much better job than his siblings. So they like he said he like changed his role model. He like did a much better job than what his role model was. And on my mom's side, nobody was talking about it, but that come to find out that is very much how their household was. Maybe 5 years ago, my uncle and I had a really good conversation, and he said, I regret not stepping in and saying something, and he was crying. He's like, he apologized and um, said like that's just always hurt his heart, and he wished that he could have done better um, for us. But I don't think it was seen as it. I think everybody was like, this is just how family is.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, roughly 40 years ago. I think it's what is talked about um, is much more out in the open now. Not that this stuff doesn't go on, but I feel like it's a little more normal for someone to say, "Hey, this isn't cool." Now versus back then. I still think in families it's hard, but the likelihood of getting that help or that rescue might be a little bit higher now than it was then, just because of the nature, I think, of the way that things have evolved. Um,
Yeah.
I want to ask you, if you don't mind, about your eating disorder, and not in detail or anything about that, but I have um, I have wondered often if girls, but it can obviously be either gender,
Mhm.
can struggle with an eating disorder because of the trauma from a divorce. We know, that eating disorders can come about as a mechanism of control. And I don't preach to be an expert. I only know a tiny bit, but that's one thing I know. But my question is, or my thought is, when you have someone struggling with an eating disorder at a young age and you have them going back and forth to different homes, I would think that it is a little harder to spot, a little easier to hide, and so how that might perpetuate further or faster or spiral in a way that if it was in a home with two parents that were somewhat aware and seeing that child on a daily basis and being able to see their habits, still knowing that it's something that can be very much hidden, um, would it be found out a little bit sooner potentially, which really saves people from going down this path for many, many, many years, or ending in very, very tragic endings. And so I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but that has always been something I have wondered, if that split home situation can potentially make an eating disorder harder to find and see.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say yes. I was so covert about it. And it didn't start as an eating disorder. I mean, everything starts like one thing and evolves and takes on its own life. But um, it, I, so I was bulimic, but I think for me, the eating like helped me like keep my mouth shut, because when I opened my mouth, I would get in trouble. I never got in trouble for like bad grades or not doing my chores. I just got in trouble for eye rolling and being mouthy. And so I think there was something like, I need something to do. And then also the dopamine hit of whatever it was, the sugar or the thing. And then I would have that high, and then I would um, want like, oh no, what have I done? And then I would purge, and then I would get the feeling again of like, oh, okay, I'm back in control. So it was like a very much easy way to have a false sense of control, because I got to set the rules and I knew I knew the expectations, right? All the pieces I could control. Um, my parents didn't know about it until I told them in my 20s. Like they had no idea. And even then they didn't understand the gravity of it.
Wow. Do you think that why do you think that they had no idea? Do you think it's just because no one was paying close enough attention? Or do you think it's they were missing things because they were preoccupied? If you were talking to a parent in your situation, in a situation, and this was something that you were trying to have them watch out for, what would you advise? What would you say?
That I actually don't have an answer for that. Um,
I mean, it speaks to there's lots of kids who have different things, and I think that what this speaks to really is when you get divorced and become co-parents, there's a certain level of like-minded awareness or alignment that is kind of necessary to continue making sure that your children are thriving. And
yeah,
let's just say it's a kid with asthma. At one house, the parent is like, take your inhaler, blah, blah, blah. And at the other house, it's expired. They totally forgot. So at one house, the kid's having like an asthma attack. And at the other house, the kid's managed and fine. There has to be some level of awareness around, hey, this kid has asthma and it's important that we do this. Can we just have that bare minimum of, awareness? This is a little different because it's not like take this, type of like medicine. But I just think that if there are many times when one parent seems to want to alert another parent to something, and that other parent wants to attack the other parent. Like, you just don't trust me. You just don't think I can take care of the kids. You just think that I don't see what's going on. And in reality, one parent might genuinely be trying to alert the other parent that, like, I have a concern about our kid. And so many times, these types of disagreements and concerns have to rise to the level of court before another parent will actually pay attention. And so, to me, this whole podcast is about trying to get parents to understand the impacts of their divorce consequences on kids. And in this situation, it's like you decided to get divorced, but that doesn't mean that you get to now turn blind eyes or blame the other parent when you have a concerning issue with your child. Because if you were in the same house, you would at least be talking about it, most likely, or at least trying to. You wouldn't be able to escape in the way that you can when you're divorced. And so it's just an interesting thing because I think that, and you can talk about drug use, you can talk about alcoholism, you can talk about many other ADHD medication. I mean, it can be anything. But I think that ultimately, when you're not trying to be in some type of alignment and awareness for the betterment of your child in these kinds of circumstances, and you can hide behind separate homes, it's actually just damaging your child more because of your divorce. You know what I mean? Like the point is that they suffer enough because they're children of divorce, but we can make it better, or we can compound the impacts over and over. And when something like this comes up, it's like you have an opportunity to just be parents and help your child. And, assuming people can be aware on their own, but I just think that divorced homes can be ripe opportunities for kids, especially in their teens, to hide things. And I think that it's a lot of times things get exacerbated because they're able to hide when they may not be able to in other circumstances, or the parents refuse to work together. And so I thought that that was an interesting thing that you brought up, because then saying they had no idea until you were in your 20s and you told them, you know?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't know. And I'm sure a lot is that there was just enough time period going, I was only with them really, like between school and other things, you know, and that I could keep it hidden pretty good. And that would go for, like you said, like anything. If, you had a kid that was doing drugs, or a kid that, like, you can kind of slide under the radar. And if they're fighting and they don't talk and everything, it is, my parents weren't like that. And so, like, when I say that they co-parented well on the parenting stuff, they just checked boxes. Do you know what I mean? Like, they didn't fight about it. There wasn't an ever like, you're supposed to pick them up at 5 and it's 5:01, and have this rigidity. They weren't that. It was like, hey, we're going here this weekend. It's your weekend. Can we flip and then just get back on schedule? And so that part my parents did well. But I would think, like, I don't think they were communicating with each other, and I don't think they had the same values. One household was one way and one household was another. Um, and I learned to play it, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I knew what I could get away with.
it's survival, right? That's what you're doing. You're trying to survive in the most advantageous way to you as a kid. Kids are so smart and they figure things out. And I think that's your situation is a good example of how you just continued to survive. It didn't matter what, and then deciding I'm going to move to my dad's when I'm 14 because I can't deal with this. No one's doing anything. It's those things where you have these children that are making these huge, big decisions at these young ages. And to your credit, you said it was one of the best things you did, and probably also hard and scary and all the other things that come with it, even though you felt or thought that it was right, you know?
Hmm.
So so, were you ever angry? Were you ever angry? Shoot, hold on one second. I'm gonna edit this out. Um, did you ever have time when you were angry at your parents? Or, I mean, with everything that was going on, I would have expected you to say that I had some real issues with them at some point, and you haven't really alluded to that. And so I just wonder, like, did that anger ever come out? Because you talked about how you held it in for a long time.
Yes, I would be explosive. And that's kind of how I would get in trouble, because I think that I would like stuff and then explode. Um which also, again, I think is very similar to the bulimia, is like I could push things down, explode, get a release, then keep moving on. And so I think that that is my little coping mechanism. I figured out how to like release enough so then I could, okay. And then, but I couldn't figure out how to not get the everything coming at me. But was I angry at my parents? Yeah. And I remember, writing my dad like, it was ridiculous, like a 12-page legal pad letter. Because somebody said it was a good idea to write everything. And he never responded. Like, but I had a relationship with him. It's not like he didn't respond because he just didn't respond. It he acted like I never gave it to him, which was more offending,
Yeah.
more offensive. And I would be angry at my mom, and she would be in denial. Like, she very much had two realities. Like, her story and my story were not the same for a lot of years. And finally, I'm like, Mom, this happened.
Wow.
Like,
So you've talked about it since.
yep, I've talked about it. For the most part, I've talked about everything with my parents, and then with my brothers. And what's interesting is my brother, who's 15 years younger, has the same story. Different household, different time, different mom, same storyline with my dad. And I think we all just worked through it and found, resolution. Not really with, I mean, it's almost like we have no expectations. We know who our dad is. Like, you know, we talk pretty frankly, matter of fact between us, and we love him. It was his birthday this past weekend, and we just laugh at the stuff that we talk, the stories and the things. And my mom and I are very close. I've always um, admired her and loved her for the good parts, and then had just a lot of heartbreak for the things that she couldn't control. She's in a wonderful marriage, and she's been married for 12 years to an amazing man. And the difference is that you can tell she feels safe. So
Interesting.
she's a lot different, which is wonderful, because then she is receptive to feedback and like, Mom, maybe try this. And she's like, what? And then when she tries that new experience, like in a communication or something, and has like is now getting what she's actually been after, then she's like more excited to try the next time I give her feedback.
Yeah. I mean, how fortunate that you have these relationships with them at an older age for them when they're in marriages that seem better, where nothing takes away your childhood. But I think about how, like, when you have a child and you feel like you're going to have them forever. And then my example is my son is going to be 13, and I'm like, wait a second, I only get to have him for this such a short period of time in his life. And you start to really, the older you get, you start to realize how little your childhood actually is in the big scheme of things. And so the fact that you can now have at least these adult relationships with them that you speak um wonderfully about, but also very rationally about, like, what to expect, like you said about your dad. And it's a very different way, but what a blessing to have that versus not be speaking to one of them, or unfortunately, if one had passed and you couldn't have that relationship. So in a weird way, you're kind of able to um just have a different experience with them, and see it from an adult's eyes. Obviously, like you mentioned, you did a lot of work, probably in the last 30 years, but which I completely commend you for. And you clearly, I mean, it's what you have been able to do, and just how you started this with all your different service to others. I think, in a way, maybe that's partly why you're so willing to do for others. And I just think that it's a beautiful thing to see someone recognize what they went through, deal with it, and come out on the other end, just, a connected, a deep person who's not afraid to tell their story, and then I think it's self-reflection is rare. It really is. And I think that if people could do that more, I think their lives would be easier, or they would be able to get to a better place. And so I think that when I see someone who has done work, and I say that from a person who's done work.
Right. Yeah.
I know how hard it is, and I know how far you can get to where you actually can see your growth and how special that is. And so I think that that's just wonderful that you've gotten there. I have one more question for you. And um what is something that you feel like from all of that, and you kind of spoke to it when you talked about holidays and Christmas and having an open door, but what is a value that you think is instilled in you now that is a result of kind of all of it? And it could have been all of the childhood plus the healing, or just the childhood. Like, what is a value that you carry now that you think is that you can see the direct relation to that?
It's a good question. Let me think. I can think like there's two things. One is I have a really, I don't know if it's empathy, but I have a good ability to kind of separate my experience and my feelings from a relationship or judgment on somebody, and say, I also don't know what actually they've been through. You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason that they're doing that. I don't agree. It doesn't mean like I want to hang out with them or I agree with them, but I think I can like always kind of go back to that and be like, I don't know what they've been through. So they're probably doing the best that they can. And then the other is in my own family, and especially now with my daughter, I wanted her to feel safe and loved, um, above all things, valued, safe, loved, secure. And with the boys, I wanted to never push on them as a parent. I came in when to their lives they were 10, 12, and 14, and they didn't need a parent, right? And I didn't want to get involved in that with their parents. They have a good dad, they have a good mom. I'm just here to help, hopefully give them wisdom, encouragement, and help, guide them with conversation. But I just think that those two things are like, I really value safety and security a lot, and peace. So I want peace in my home. I want peace in my family. I want open communication. And if there's an issue and it's going to be, I don't want to hear it, like, I still want to hear it. Like, okay, I'll buckle up, but please say it. If you need to say it, we need to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, those are all things that you wish that you just had it, that you didn't have to figure it out. But I think obviously that's life. And I think that what you're able to bring to your stepsons is huge, because what I also have been learning is step parents are critical. They can make or break a situation so fast.
Yeah.
And you coming in with that perspective makes them very fortunate. You know, I'm realizing how step parents are such a critical piece. And again, like, to my point of this podcast, if people can hear that and choose wisely, I think that
Right.
that I don't I think it's hard because you obviously choose a partner for you. You're the one dating them, you're the one marrying them, whatever. But the reality is, when you are divorced and you have children, if you don't for a second think about that impact on the children, of bringing that person in and then that person and your children directly, it can cause massive pain.
Yeah.
It can also be
Yeah.
the most beautiful guiding light for children also, but just being aware of that spectrum of what it can be, it should be something that is considered, I think, a little more often than it may be.
Yeah. I
But
think like, if when I was as a manicurist, because I was a manicurist for 23 years, I did have the fortunate opportunity of sitting across the table from women older than me that had gone through different things before me, who would give me advice. I also saw a lot of behaviors and heard a lot of things and went, note self, right?
yeah,
And I think, like, if I was going to give advice for step parent, I would be like, do not force anything. They don't force it. Like, invite it, but like, to expect a kid to want you because their parent wants you is like messed up. It's a lot to ask, and then when you're trying to force something, um, it's not authentic and it's resented, and I think that that can cause issues. But I am very blessed with three wonderful sons. They're truly wonderful. So I got lucky on the lottery on that.
well, sounds like everybody did, so that's good.
Yeah.
Well, so my last question is completely unrelated. I try to end on a slightly lighter note. Um, and all I'm looking for is a book recommendation. So, do you have a book that you think is great that you would recommend to anyone listening?
I do, actually. In fact, I put two in my Amazon cart today to give to friends. It's called Prosperity's Not Luck, It's Your Birthright by Ruth Fernandez, I think is the last name.
Okay.
It's really good. I read it and I kind of like read it like a study, because it's just a mindset change for sure. But
Interesting.
prosperity meaning like doing well, not just financially.
Right, right. And by Ruth, you said? Ruth. Okay.
Ruth Fernandez. I'm pretty sure that's the last name.
Oh, that is not one I've heard, so I'm very excited. Thank you.
Cool.
Well, I want to wrap this up and just say, I feel like I could continue talking to you and keep asking you for different insights. I feel as though you are just a beautiful resource and representation of, like, really difficult, but your strength when you were a child was actually really amazing. And than what you've done to get to here and your perspective. I think it's beautiful. And not that I am anyone to you in terms of being proud of you, but I feel very proud of you.
Take it. Thank you.
And I just think it's a wonderful thing to see. And I think that, I think your story in lots of ways can resonate with people. And that's to me the most important thing. So thank you so much for sharing.
Man, thank you. I really appreciate the invite and the opportunity just to say it.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye, Shannon.
Thanks for tuning in. Together we can shape healthier paths for families to do divorce better. See you next time on In Between Them.